The NFL Scouting Combine is here. What do you need to look for? What does it mean? How are things changing with the advent of new data? We're going to talk about all of that and more here on The Real Forno Show.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to The Real Forno Show, hosted by the one and only Tyler Forness. A to Z Sports sought him out to be their Minnesota Vikings reporter and NFL analyst. And he's a proud contributor over at SKOL North's Purple Daily. Tyler is also the captivating host of The Good, The Bad, and The Hungry on the Voices of Wrestling Podcast Network, and a founding member of Vikings First and SKOL.
Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another episode of The Real Forno Show, sponsored by our friends at Underdog Fantasy. My name is Tyler Forness. With me, as always, in the top left corner, he is producer Dave. We're taping this because right now I am drinking about 12 Tecates on the beach in Mexico, and I will not be able to do a show live, but we still wanted to bring you stuff back. Hey, Odie's even in the background borking because he's excited about the pre-record. How are you, sir?
I'm doing good, and I'm sort of jealous of that trip down to Mexico. It's going to be warm.
Hey, thank God. It's been like -10 the last few days here. I could use an umbrella and a margarita and a Tecate. So I'm very excited about that. But before we get to the combine, I kind of wanted to mention something that I found very interesting. Odie, that's a monitor. You don't want to do that. Odie is having fun playing right behind me. You can't see him, but he's right there. One of the things I found interesting, because there's going to be a lot of conversation about Sam Darnold's contract status, the franchise tag as we go into the NFL Scouting Combine, which is essentially just the senior hallway in high school. It's Gossip Central. And one of the things that's interesting is, will the Vikings choose to tag him for a potential trade? We've talked about it. Tag and trade isn't necessarily the most fruitful thing. We also don't see it often with quarterbacks, which could honestly complicate things in a positive way for the Vikings. And there was one instance, Odie, I hear you. You're fine. One instance where you have the New England Patriots pulled off a successful tag and trade. And the reason why that's important is Kevin O'Connell saw it happen right in front of him because he was on the Patriots roster. Matt Castle took over in 2007 when Tom Brady tore his ACL in week 1 against the Kansas City Chiefs. And he led the team to an 11-5 season. Yeah, they didn't make the playoffs, but they're the only 11-win team to date to miss the playoffs. So it was kind of a historic season in that aspect, but they were good. They weren't as good as they were with Tom Brady. Sorry, it was the 08 season, not 07, but the point remains. So after that year, the Patriots tagged Matt Castle thinking, hey, we don't want to let this guy go for nothing. And they were right. The Kansas City Chiefs traded 2 second-round picks to the New England Patriots for the rights to sign Castle to a long-term deal, which ended up working out great for the Patriots because you got 2 second-round picks. That rocks. And because of that, I'm very curious if Kevin O'Connell will see that, having seen it work, and all of a sudden decide, hey, I want to try this. I think that this can work. And I think that we can get a better draft pick now because we need it more now than we do next year. And I think that's a really intriguing element. And because of that experience, like, so many people will derive things from their past experience. And I think it's very interesting. I also think, Dave, that the Vikings won't do this unless they get a sense from other teams at the Combine that they want to trade for Sam Darnold. They really want Sam Darnold. If they can get a bidding war, that's how you get something like 2 second-round picks. You don't just get that because you decide you wanted to. You get that because other teams are fighting.
Exactly. And I'm hearing Tennessee makes a logical choice that they're going to pick Sam Darnold and then get the player they want at the top of the draft. Well, if they're willing to do that, to sign Sam Darnold and then get, whoever they want at the top of the draft, a difference maker, a blue chipper that's not a quarterback, that makes sense to me. And they may be willing to give up a second or whatever and to get that. Now, you're 100% correct. It's going to be at the combine that states, that they're going to get the talking, the gossip, the whole meeting at whatever restaurant and talking about different things. If they can get, Tennessee, Oakland, LA, or Las Vegas Raiders, the Steelers, all talking about we want Sam.
Yeah.
Then you start a bidding war.
Absolutely. And I think the bidding war is going to be the biggest factor here. One of the things that, we can kind of harken this back to the Kirk Cousins signing in 2018. There was a bidding war. It's why the Vikings had to go to a fully guaranteed $84 million contract for Kirky Boy. And they probably don't have to do that if the Jets weren't fighting them tooth and nail, because the Jets offered more. Now, the Vikings did give Cousins bonuses, where if he wins a Super Bowl, he gets $2 million per Super Bowl. So he could have maxed out at $90 million. He never got there, but he still got what he wanted to go where he wanted to go. And the Vikings likely came in, I would guess, around $75 million to start. But then you have a team like the Jets who can drive that price up. That's going to be huge if the Vikings want to get capital for Sam Darnold, because there are people who will tell you, oh, you just tag and trade. It's no problem. Well, basic economics, you have to have somebody willing to give you what you think he's worth. And if you tag him and you tie up all this money for the first wave of free agency, and then you rescind the tag and just let him go, you also screwed yourself. So you got to be sure. You have to know that you're going to get something. If you just let him walk, then you play the comp pick game and get a third-round pick, and you move on. And I think that's okay. It's okay to do that. But you have to know whatever decision you make is the right one. And I think that's a really important factor here.
I agree. It's a risk, but they'll find out. They'll put the feelers out in Indy next week, and this plan will come together one way or another.
Speaking of feelers, Dave, let's talk about kind of what to expect from the NFL Scouting Combine. It is not just about the on-field workouts, not just about the interviews and the medicals. It's about, hey, I run into an agent. Hey, why don't I buy you a $40 million coffee? You don't have to do that. It only costs $35 million. Like that kind of thing. Like those conversations happen. They're discreet. There's tampering by everybody, which is why nobody gets accused of tampering unless it's blatantly admitted, like Kirk Cousins, because he's an absolute buffoon. So everybody does it. And I think because everybody does it, it's just widely accepted. Kind of like how steroids was in baseball in the 90s until they decided, hey, we should probably stop this. And then they did. So maybe that time is coming for the NFL. But until then, the combine is such an important place for information gathering. It's one of the reasons why I'm a little disappointed I'm not going, because gathering that information is a huge part of this whole process, a huge part of understanding what players are like, where they're going to go, what teams are interested in who. And those factors are a big part of the process. Now, what's also a big part of the process is pretty much every team's GM and head coach does a press conference. I think when it comes to these press conferences, don't hold your breath that you're going to get much out of them, because the people that are asking these questions are not the people that ask them normally. So they're going to ask about, what are you going to do with Sam Darnold? Well, the thing is, guys like Kevin Seifert and Ben Gessling have already asked those questions. So they already know what's going on. They don't need to ask them in a presser. But you're getting people, and not necessarily people who are jabronis, but people who don't ask these guys questions more than once a year. So they're going to ask questions that they may not realize there's already an answer for out there. Last year, adofo-mensah gave us nothing in that presser, which stunk. Kevin O'Connell gave us about the same because people were asking questions we've already gotten answers to. So don't hold your breath that it's going to be a worthwhile presser. You're going to get worthwhile answers, because you may not get anything.
No,
which
and
kind of stinks.
Because they're open to, they credential people from the Boston Globe or the LA Times or somebody that's isn't in Minnesota all the time. those people are the ones that show up to the press conferences, and they're the ones asking the questions. So always keep that in mind, that it's generally not the local guys. Now, they do generally, if I remember correctly, haul the local ones and have a separate conference afterwards, or sit down, and then we get more detailed answers on things that we actually care about and is new.
I agree. I think that's going to be a really important thing here too, is you're going to get answers from stuff because the beat writers are there. You're going to get people like Gessling and Seifert asking those questions and getting more in-depth answers of stuff that we really haven't gotten answers to yet. And those things I think are really important, because it's when the beat asks those questions. So I think that's a really big factor. One thing that I find interesting here when kind of looking at everything is what information is coming out and what it means. So I like the idea of these things. I like the idea of having these pressers, but they may not result in anything, which I just think needs to be understood, because the people asking these questions, they're asking for the first time. When you ask somebody questions for the first time, you're probably getting different answers.
And you're going to get a lot of coach and GM speak.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. Let's talk about what the combine means and kind of the process. So guys are going to get in like almost like 5 to 6 days before testing begins. They're going to do medicals. They're going to do interviews. They're going to do stuff like the Wonderlic. Then the day before they're testing, they're going to do a bunch of media stuff. And then they're going to have their day of testing. So they go through a grueling week. And it's incredibly frustrating for them. Go ahead, Dave.
Why is it always in Indianapolis? Do you know?
So I think it's all logistical, because they're able to, with all the medical facilities surrounding Lucas Oil Stadium, I think what they do, and somebody can correct me if I'm wrong, I think they move everything into like this giant like conference room, and they do everything in a centralized area, and everything is so centrally located where it makes it easy for the teams, makes it easy for the players, makes it easy for the medical staff. It's just all centrally located and easy and smooth. And it's familiar to everybody because everybody goes to Indy every year for the combine. So being able to do that and have a city that understands what it takes to run this event and have all those things in place, it's important.
Yeah, they've got the MRIs and the CAT scans and all the test facilities for how much oxygen they're absorbing and et cetera, to evaluate these players. So much so that the military, when it's contractors that we had to process through Indianapolis, they moved it because the medical system was right there.
I know, right? It's going to be very interesting to see, like, because they're talking about shipping it off to the highest bidder.
Right. And that's fine. They want to do it like the draft and have different cities do it. But each city would have to have the appropriate medical and other logistics needs available and ready to go. And it would take a whole lot of forethought. It's not just, hey, we got a plan for so many fans being here yelling and screaming for so many days and we're good.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more to it than, a draft.
Yeah, there is. There's a lot of factors, and the logistics are such a big part of it, and something I'm not going to say the NFL hasn't thought about it, but I don't think they've given enough credence to it yet. And I think that's a really big factor here.
Well, the whole thing is time. Hey, if we have it in Minnesota, we got the Mayo Clinic. All right. They've obviously got the medical technology there. How far is it from US Bank to Mayo?
Like an hour, 15, hour and a half.
Right. So if you're suddenly having to drive people an hour and 15 one way and an hour and 15, hour and a half the other, you're wasting 3 hours in a day. That these players could be doing other things as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Whereas Indy, it's right there.
Yeah, the logistics are so important for something like this, and that's really the long and the short of it. Let's kind of talk about what it means for testing, and I think this is a really interesting conversation. One I honestly cannot answer, because when it comes to the athletic testing, Dave, we understand what like some athletic thresholds are. Like, if guys who run this 40-yard dash are usually more successful than guys who run slower than this, like cornerbacks, if you run 4.4s, you're going to be more likely to succeed than if you run 4.5s or slower. That's just how it works. But one thing that's really interesting with the advent of technology is we have GPS tracking data, and you have teams like the Rams. I think the Rams like pretty much skip the combine because they have all the data. One of the really tough things to parse out with that GPS data is we don't have a long-term scope of what's going on. And we don't have a lot of data that says, hey, this is concrete. We know that when we see this number, it translates to success X amount of time because it's a much smaller data set. And that aspect is fascinating because more teams are starting to transition to it. I believe, based on kind of my research with how Kwesi Adofo-Mensah handles the NFL draft, the Vikings have shifted heavily towards GPS data as well. So those elements are a big factor in success. But how much of that is going to, like, can you use that as a predictive metric yet? I really don't know. I don't have a good answer for you because, one, we don't have it as a public. We don't have public-facing GPS data. We get some things from like Next Gen Stats, True Media, but we can't just look at the data and determine that, hey, this is what it is and this is what's going on. Right, Odie?
And that translates to success in the NFL. Now, what we're talking about are the sensors they wear or however they monitor, and they all wear sensors now. And we're talking about game speed, right? You can run a 4.4 or a 4.5 and do lousy, but if your game speed shows you at 21.7 miles an hour, covering a pass, wait a minute, there's a difference there. I'd rather have the game speed, you being able to run fast on the field in pads, covering a receiver, than actually in shorts on the sideline. Now, what I'm curious is, besides all the measurements, right? Guy is so tall, weighs so much, our arm length is such and such, hand size is such and such. Those all can be done in their relatively, benign stats, but they look for those. The whole thing of how high you can jump. We've done it for years now, and GMs have a metric, say, I need a 36-inch vertical jump, or whatever the number is. Or for linemen or tight ends, I need a broad jump of over 10 feet because it shows power in the legs. Mm-hmm. And we know that guys that can jump over that much tend to be successful in the NFL. So we're looking for that. Or I'm looking for a 3-cone drill because it measures quickness or agility more than a 40-yard dash. And it's a lot of times very position specific, right? You want guys to be strong in the upper body doing the bench press, right? But does that necessarily translate? Well, it depends on the position. Does it matter that the punter can bench press 21 times? No, he's not using his upper body. He's using his leg. Now, but it does matter on offensive linemen to help show how strong they are on their upper body. Does that matter as much as how strong they are on their lower body? Probably not. But there's different ways to measure, and then how to translate that from the GPS stuff, the sensors, because the sensor doesn't cover that.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm curious how they're blending the two.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I don't really have a good answer for that. And that's one of the tough things about really trying to quantify this data. We don't have good answers from a public facing perspective now. I think if you were to talk off the record with some of these organizations, they'd be able to give you like, okay, well, here's what we found. We found that X matters because of this, and it translates to that. I'm like, okay, I think then you can really quantify and understand that this is working, and you can have this and use it to make better informed decisions. Because tracking a guy who can run from the 20-yard line to the opposite 40-yard line in a straight line in full pads and cleats is a better semblance of what we're talking about than watching a guy run a 40 in track shoes. You don't use track shoes. Matt Burke famously was talking about when he was with the NFLPA, talking about how to change the combine and change how some of the metrics. Because you have, what was I going to say? Like the 40 is kind of outdated, but if you do a 60-yard dash, you get a flying 40. So you get how fast you are when you're already in full momentum from 20 to 60 yards. And then 20 is about that quickness, about getting off the block. I think those things matter. I think those things matter a little bit more. And I find it interesting that they end up manifesting like that. Like, that's why I think the GPS data eventually is going to be phenomenal. I don't think there's enough information for us to be able to tell you if it's great yet. And NFL teams will be able to tell you that. You're just never going to get an answer out of any of them. But that's where, like, Kwesi Adofo-Mensah, the first year was all about 10-yard split, 10-yard split, 10-yard split, 10-yard split. And I think they found a way to translate the 10-yard split into GPS tracking data. Because Jordan Addison did not test very well. He was like a 56th percentile athlete at wide receiver, size adjusted too. Because like with RAS, weight and height matter.
So, everything does. Bench press, whatever.
Yeah. And he weighed like 173 pounds. Well, the dude just wins at playing football. And I think that matters more.
And what can you measure acceleration better? Coming out of a block, right? Where you're not even in your stance. You're in a sprinter stance versus, standing up like you're going to run a route. And take Addison. Addison puts on a move and then he goes. Now it's that go portion. How quickly does he accelerate? How does he go from a quick move, a juke, or whatever it is, to full speed? Or to 3/4 speed and then to full speed? I think where if they could narrow in on the GPS data, they could figure that out. And they probably can, because it all depends on how quickly the GPS data updates. But it'd be interesting.
Yeah, it'll be very interesting. And I'm fascinated to kind of see how everything works itself out and what answers we learn over the course of time. But until then, we have to kind of go with the old school method, Dave. We have to go
with that as fans and reporters.
I know. It's interesting to kind of look at that. And I'm really excited to kind of see some of the testing. I'm sad I'm going to miss the defensive line drills because I'll be flying home from Mexico. Maybe Delta will have a screen that I can turn on NFL Network and I can just watch it because I'm a degenerate. But
they have Wi-Fi on the airplane. You use your phone.
Yeah, but I'm not going to pay like the $20. Screw that. That sounds awful. Like I don't want to pay $20. That's a lot of money. But when you look at some of the athletic testing stuff, there are guys who will benefit more than others. There are guys who will fall more than others. Your hyper athletes that test poorly are going to fall. It's because you don't have a what's the framing I want to use here. When you are a great athlete, if you don't prove that you're a great athlete with great testing, it can crater your draft stock. You should not have your draft stock rise that much because you tested well, but it certainly can fall if you test poorly. And then you have to contextualize, well, why? Bucky Irving last year was the guy for me that really taught me a lesson to really trust the film more than testing, because he tested really poorly at 190 pounds. Wasn't fast, wasn't explosive, wasn't agile. But then when I watched the film, it's like, this dude does all of those things really well. And I'm like, you know what? I'm going to trust the film, and I'm going to trust that I got it right. And I did. I stayed high on Bucky Irving, and I was right. I had a second round grade on him. He was picked in the 4th or the 5th, one of those, and had 1,000 yards in his rookie year. Yeah, I feel pretty good about that.
Well, that's where the GPS data comes in.
Yeah.
If you have a full set of GPS data, it might sway you versus the 40 time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's fascinating to kind of look at everything. There are a few players that I think need to have good weeks. One of them is Kenneth Grant. He's just got to prove that he's the freak athlete everybody thought. Just do a couple freaky stuff and then bow out. Just run an under 5-second 40, jump at 34 inches in the vertical, and call it a day. Like, that's it. Those things are hard to do when you're 339 pounds, but that's what he has to do, because that's what he's been doing at Michigan. That's what's been reported that he's able to do at Michigan. And that matters. You got to prove it. If he doesn't prove it, that could be bad. Travis Hunter's another one where I think the testing could help him. Help is a relative term, because I think he goes top 5 pretty much no matter what. But maybe great testing would allow teams to feel more comfortable playing him more snaps at wide receiver, which is what he wants to do. And that could end up being a huge factor for him. Running backs, just breaking 4.5. Run 4.5 or faster. So a 4.49 would do wonders for somebody like DJ Giddens at Kansas State. Giddens, I think, is a 4.55, maybe 4.6 guy, but he's so good at seeing the field and being able to read blocks and being able to cut up and do a lot of those things. Like, those things will matter to these guys. And I think that is a big factor in how you manifest all of this stuff. Trevor Etienne and RJ Harvey, they're both 5'8" or shorter. And if you got to run fast if you're small. But they're both over 200 pounds. They're both well built. They're small in height. They're not small in stature. And that will also factor in here too. I think if they run well, it could do wonders for the draft stock. And I want to see how that manifests. I want to see how all of this works out. This is a very interesting combine. We're going to see a lot of stuff, a lot of freaky edge rushers and defensive tackles. Shamar Stewart, I've talked about at length on multiple avenues. Look, if that dude's available at 24, you take him and you just figure it out. I love him. I think he's great. But I think he goes top 5 and has a Trevon Walker-like ascension, because guys at 6'5", 281 do not move like that. They just don't. It's rare. It's special. And you're going to see guys kind of be like, oh, risers and fallers out of the combine. Beware of that, because confirmation bias can be a tough one to parse out. Don't buy into all the hype. Don't buy into these guys where, what's the framing I want to use? Don't just all of a sudden be completely in or completely out because one guy completely bombs. Well, the film is the most important thing. Then you have to use the testing data to contextualize it and determine if it's worth it or not. There's a lot of factors with that. And the combine is going to give us a lot of information. It's going to help separate some guys from the pack. Hopefully my mock draft roundups start to clean up a little bit, because, oh my gosh, 35 different prospects already is wild. Insane numbers. But that's the kind of draft class we have. It's just a weird one. It's a very weird one.
And I'm sure it will clear up a bit, but we're down at 24, picking at 24. So it's still going to be a wide spread.
yeah, it is going to be very widespread, and I'm excited to kind of see how everything works, how everything looks, and it's going to be a fun thing to come back to when I get done in Mexico, because man, I'm going to be drinking a lot of margaritas. I'm going to be drinking a lot of Tecate, and going to be eating a lot of food. It's going to be a good time. But
I got a question.
Go ahead.
Does Underdog have lines on combine performances?
Oh yeah. I'm going to be making a lot of money when that comes around. I would have made thousands of dollars last year. Braylon Allen would have run, but he didn't, and he's a coward, and he cost me lots of money. But we're not going to go there. Yeah, they're going to have lines out, and those are going to be really, really. There's going to be some egregious ones because there are every year. They always screw this up. And I think it's going to be a lot of fun to kind of see how it all plays, and you have a chance to make some real cash. It'll be fun. You are going to want to pick a lineup on Underdog Fantasy. You're going to want to pick 2 to 8 different lines, higher or lower. And then at the end of the day, you're hopefully going to bring in some bucks. All you need to do is sign up with the promo code Forno in any of the states available on your screen. You'll get a first-time deposit match up to $1,000. Join us. Make every game just a little bit more exciting, and the combine will be as well. There's opportunities there, and we can have some fun. There's Underdog Fantasy. Download the app. Use that promo code. Dave, that is our show.
Hey.
A lot of interesting things to watch at the combine, and we're going to be back probably on Friday afternoon. We still need to talk about that and figure it out and get the logistics, but I'll be back from vacation. I will be tan. I will be better looking, and I will have alcohol.
Imagine you coming back and you're just beet red.
Oh, let's be real, that may happen. But I will be having fun and relaxing. It'll be a good time.
Well,
but we'll have something on Friday.
And I'm curious, because we're talking about the old school measurements and some of the new with the GPS. We're in a transition phase right now. And with more and more technologies coming on, we talk about how Jaden Daniels uses the VR stuff, and they're trying to measure how fast somebody's brain works. I wonder if there's going to be some visuals on that they're now testing, where they get in the booth and they're looking at something and they're clicking a button. Yeah, I see it. I just got my eye exam last week, and we had one of those things. And it flips out how, far as your peripheral vision, how quickly, how light can you see, and how quick do you respond? All that sort of thing is now being tested because people have learned over time that matters.
Mm-hmm. And some of it is hard to quantify too because it's new data. Mm-hmm. But once we learn, then we can be better. And we're going to learn a lot at the combine this weekend. We're going to have a lot to talk about on Friday. Thank you guys so much for listening. Sorry we were not able to be live, but I haven't had like real time off in 3 years. So I'm going to enjoy this. Thank you guys so much. I'm Tyler. He's Dave. SKOL Vikings.
SKOL Vikings. Like, subscribe, and ring the bell to get notifications. It helps us grow this community that we all love, our Minnesota Vikings. And on behalf of Tyler Forness and myself, Dave Stefano, thank you so dearly for watching The Real Forno Show. SKOL, everyone!